This is Max Grossman with the El Paso Taxpayer Revolt, and today we are honored to have with us Judge Alma Trejo, candidate for District Attorney. We're going to learn all about her experience, her policy priorities, and she'll be able to talk at length about the issues that concern this office. So glad you could be here with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure to meet you.
Good meeting you too.
What should I call you, Judge?
Alma's fine.
Alma, Max. We'll keep it informal.
Yes.
Excellent. So why don't we begin with your life? Tell us where you're from, where you grew up, and take us to how you got into the law.
Okay. First of all, I'm a first-generation American. My dad was a bracero. He came over in 1958, and he went to Pecos. That's where he met my mom, who was cleaning houses. She was from Ojinaga, another part of Mexico. After that, he stayed in agriculture, so we traveled from Pecos. I was born in Midland. I don't know what the crop was at that point. Then 3 years later, my brother was born in California, because the crop was strawberries back then. And then after that, we came back to Pecos, and then we finally settled in Fagans, which is a small farming community. I don't know if everybody's familiar with Fagans. It's about 30 miles away. And that's where I grew up. I went to school there. I graduated from Fagans High School. I started working at the age of 14 as a waitress in one of the local restaurants. I stayed there for 10 years. And once I graduated from high school, I came to UTEP. I used to commute every single day. And I came to UTEP wanting to be a math teacher. That was my goal, a math teacher. I'm all about numbers. I'm all about metrics. I'm all about data. That's my passion. And so it wasn't until my junior or sophomore year that I met Mr. Kevin Shannon. I don't know if you know him. He was the first assistant at the DA's office at that time. And he was our professor for one of the criminal justice courses. Once he started talking about all his cases and everything that he does, I was hooked. I knew I wanted to do criminal law. He opened my eyes. At first, I didn't even think law school was an option. I had never met a lawyer. I didn't know what lawyers meant, what lawyers did. And after talking to him, and he kind of mentored all of us. There's a lot of us that were on the bench that were mentored by Mr. Shannon. That's when I decided to go to law school. So I went to law school, went to Texas Tech, graduated from there. And then I came back to El Paso and I started interning at the county attorney's office.
What year was that?
This was in 1991 when I graduated from Texas Tech. 1991,
you got your JD.
Yes.
Why criminal law? What attracts you to criminal law?
It's just the cases. There's nothing more exciting than trying cases. Mm-hmm. And with criminal law, it's like playing chess. It's one of those things where you have to anticipate the defense's moves, at least 3 moves up front. It's that, and then you get to put the bad guys in jail. I mean, what is there not to love?
It's quite a story. So your father was a bracero, and you went to college, commuted on your own, and went to Texas Tech. Were you the first person in your family to go to college?
Yes.
Certainly the first with an advanced degree.
Yes, but not the last.
Not the last.
Not the last.
Excellent,
mm-hmm.
Excellent. So 1991, you begin your career. Why don't you take us through that and tell us about your experience?
Okay. I started as an intern at the county attorney's office. Back then, I believe it was Mr. Joe Lucas. Mm-hmm. And the way I kind of fell into that is there was another lawyer from Fagans. And at the restaurant where I was working, everybody's like, well, you need to go talk to her. So I literally went up to her doorstep and introduced myself. And she was the first assistant at the county attorney's office, and that's how I got my internship. And then after that, I was licensed, I passed the bar. And then I became a misdemeanor prosecutor, and I started doing mental commitments. And with Judge Hicks, and we used to have to drive every Monday it used to be the old Thomason. And that's where we would hold the mental commitments. So I did that for about a year.
Explain mental commitments to our viewers. What is that exactly?
Mental commitments is any time that a family member or anybody anybody else feels that somebody is a danger to themselves or others and they shouldn't be out, then they can file a petition. And then then after that, a psychiatrist evaluates them, and then you hold a hearing.
Okay, I need to interrupt us 1 second because we have an unexpected, unwelcome visitor. Just give me 1 second. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So sorry, I'm in the middle of a meeting.
Okay, this is for you. This is what it is. And not read.
Apologies for that interruption.
Oh, no worries.
We'll just continue.
Yes, and then a psychiatrist will evaluate this person. If they do make the finding that they are a danger to themselves or others, then they can be held involuntarily at the hospital for mental health treatment.
Okay. And then how long did you do that?
I did that for about a year.
Okay.
And then, so that takes us to 1992. In 1992, we had a new DA and a new county attorney. That's when Mr. Jose Rodriguez, let me see, I'm trying to remember. I know Mr. Jose Rodriguez became the county attorney and Jaime Esparza became the district attorney. Before then, we handled all the DWIs and misdemeanors, the county attorney side. And I say side because we were literally on the second floor. The DAs were on that side, county attorneys were on this side before the offices actually grew, when everybody literally fit in one office. And then the new county attorney didn't want to deal with criminal prosecution, so he sent over all the prosecution to Jaime, including all the prosecutors. So that's how I wound up at the district attorney's office.
Okay, that's interesting. And I'm sure you knew Jose Rodriguez real well.
Yes.
As a good friend of mine.
Yes.
Went on to become state senator.
Yes, wonderful man. As a matter of fact, he recently endorsed me, so.
Okay. Take us forward.
Okay. Then I was now at the district attorney's office. I was a line prosecutor, and I was doing, I think I did misdemeanors for maybe a couple of months, and then I was promoted to a felony court. And that's when I started working on the felony cases. Mm-hmm. One of the big cases that I remember being literally green, and then I had a very serious bodily injury on a child. So those were the type of cases I was trying in the court. When you're a line prosecutor and you're in the court, whatever cases come in, it could be a rape, it could be a murder, it could be injury to a child, it could be possession of cocaine, whatever it is. So I did that for a few years. I was in the 243rd. And then after that, I was promoted to chief. So then I now became a supervisor of the felony prosecutors. And
in the years when you're gaining your experience, are you litigating? First chair?
Yes.
The floor?
I mean, you're it.
Okay.
Well, you're it. Every Monday, you're it. You're picking juries every Monday. I don't know how many cases I tried. I know in the 243rd, every Monday, it seemed like I was picking a jury. Every Saturday, it was myself and about 10 other felony prosecutors. We were always there getting ready for Monday because Monday was or die or day.
And Jaime Esparza was your boss?
Yes.
What was it like working under Esparza?
You know what? That was a very good time to be there. A lot of us had so much in common. And as the prosecutors, I can tell you some of my friends from right now, we all started there at the same time. I remember like on Friday afternoons, we would all meet, we would all cram into somebody's office because they were tiny little offices, and we'd talk about the cases that we were going to try the next week. And then if somebody knew some of the case law, keep in mind computers, we didn't have computers back then, so it was literally you had to have the case like in paper on your desk. So we would talk about motions to suppress, any trials that were coming up, we'd help each other, and it was just a great place to work.
Right, and of course, Esparza went on to become federal attorney of the Western District of Texas, which is based in San Antonio but represents our region, and there are 4 of them in Texas. So that's quite a high position that he now occupies. Okay, so you did this for a number of years, and then what?
And then I became a supervisor. I was still trying cases. I was responsible for not only supervising, but teaching the felony prosecutors how to prosecute. So I did that for a few years. And then after that, I was promoted to the chief of the rape and child abuse unit.
Ooh, what
Yes.
year was that?
Ooh, I'm trying to remember. Maybe 96?
Rape
97?
and child abuse unit.
Yes,
That
and
sounds
it's literally
ominous.
the way it sounds is the way it is. We were in charge. It was two of us, and we were in charge of indicting those cases, investigating those cases. And back then, what we had this collaborative center, the Child Advocacy Center, the Child Advocacy Center, and the police had an office there, the DAs had an office there, the sheriffs had, CPS, all the agencies that were involved. So anytime an allegation was made, they would bring in the child, and at least two agencies would witness the interview. So let's say it was PD, police department. Then if it was their case, then maybe SO and DA or SO and CPS would be there to witness the interview and to kind of help out. So those cases came in. I mean, we were involved from the get-go.
Now, those cases, I think many El Pasoans would agree, are the worst.
They are.
They're the most heartrending. In many ways, worse than murder, because who is more innocent than a child? How do you deal with that psychologically? How hard was that, just dealing with those tasks, prosecuting those people?
I think, I mean, they are the hardest cases. They are the worst cases you'll ever see. But you just have to remind yourself while you're there to put these people, get them off the streets, and make sure it doesn't happen to another child, another female, another male. I mean...
Right. So there were two of you who managed this unit. And
well, I managed the unit. I had somebody that I oversaw.
Was that second chair? Or?
Well, I guess you would be my second chair.
Okay. And you did that for how long?
Ooh, I think till the end, till I left the office in 2002 when I took the bench, April 15th of 2002. So I was the head of that unit for the duration. I can't remember when I became the chief.
So now you're 10 years out of law school. You gained a lot of experience as a prosecutor.
Yes.
2002, what's next?
Okay, two county courts were created, County Court 1, CCR 1 and CCR 2, and I ran for a bench. I was successful, and so I started my career as a judge.
In which are the two courts?
The other one is County Criminal Court number 2, and that's Judge Anchondo, who's still there. So
you were County Criminal Court number 1 from its creation?
Yes.
In 2002?
I was the first judge elected to that bench.
Criminal Court?
Yes.
Okay.
County Criminal.
And how long did you occupy that position?
Up to last September 30th, so 21 years.
21 years as a judge in that court?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that experience. How did you enjoy being a judge as opposed to being an attorney prosecuting?
It was different in the beginning. I was used to litigating, so it's hard to literally just be the umpire. It's hard to, first of all, have a poker face, and it's hard because you start thinking, oh, I wouldn't have done that, or I wouldn't have done this. So that, I think, like maybe the first year. After that, I enjoyed my job. I enjoyed what I was doing. I was making a difference. I was basically, it's not just being a judge. It's also mentoring all my ADAs that were there, all my PDs, all the young attorneys. I was always there for them. I would always, after trial, I would tell them, well, you know what, you could have done this, and I had an open door policy. People would always come in. They knew I was the head of the rape and unit in there, so I would have a lot of attorneys, both state and defense, come and ask me questions about that. We presided over hundreds of DWIs, family violence cases. That's when I understood the whole system. Because I think when you're at the DA's office, you have tunnel vision. This is all you know. Prosecuting, that's all you know. Once I became a judge, I became an employer. So now all these county regulations regarding hiring, valuations, and everybody thinks hiring people it's easy. I can tell you it is not. There's a lot of rules and there's a lot of things that you have to go through. So it opened my eyes to a different area of, I won't say, just a different area of business and management. And that's when I became, like I said, an employer. So you start thinking differently. That same year, I was asked to be a member of the Juvenile Probation Department Board. So I started with that. And then, so I started seeing the juvenile. When I was at the county attorneys, I think I prosecuted only one juvenile case. So here, we were overseeing the whole department and learning about all the programs that they had and things like that. I did that for 20 years. I left that board when I left the bench. So I was literally there for 20 years. I can tell you our juvenile probation department is one of the best in the country. I mean, they do amazing work.
Really? How many criminal courts were there in the county when you were working there? What was the total number of courts?
Misdemeanor 8, and felony we have 12.
So 20 courts.
20 courts that preside over criminal cases.
Each with a judge.
Yes.
Who's elected.
Yes.
20 judges.
Yes, but there's more. There's 30 elected judges.
Who are the other 10?
The other 10 are civil and family.
I see. And you campaign, of course, every 4 years.
Yes.
So you have run for judge 5 times.
6 times.
6 times, right?
Yes.
Because you're in your 21st. And then you retired when exactly?
I resigned September 30th. And the reason I resigned is because under the Texas Constitution and the Code of Judicial Conduct, I couldn't run for DA and be a judge at the same time.
You had to resign to run.
Yes, resign to run.
Let me ask
as a county official and as a judge. So I had like 2 separate governing statutes over me.
Let me ask you another question. Every judge has his or her reputation.
Yes.
And that's a reputation that you earn over time.
Yes.
Some judges have a reputation for being very difficult. Others don't have a good reputation among attorneys. How do you perceive your reputation during the 21 years you were on the bench? How do you think you were perceived?
It reminds me of the 3 ways, the 3 ways of looking at, of how people see you. It's how people see you, how you think they see you, and what's the other one? And how they actually see you. I was very fair. I was always very fair as a prosecutor. I wasn't one of those gotcha prosecutors where I cut corners or I was out to win. If I had a case, I had a case. If I didn't, I didn't. That's it. I turned over all the evidence. I wasn't going to play hide the ball. It wasn't worth my license. So I already had that reputation coming onto the bench. And it's basically the same criminal bar. So I think I had a good reputation. I had an open door policy. People were always allowed to come in. Obviously, they couldn't discuss the case in my court, but they would always come in. I always had people coming in and asking for things. I was there all the time. I was one of those people, actually, I created the judicial metrics. So I knew exactly what I had, what I was disposing of, how old my cases were. I think I was one of those judges that I kind of went overboard. I would run my own reports to see who was in jail. I wanted to make sure that we took care of those cases immediately. I would run reports for everything. So I was one of those judges that honestly, I put in way over 40 hours.
Right. Now you're, if I'm not mistaken, you're the only one running for this race who has actually served in elected office. Is that correct?
Well, Mr. Hicks was a judge.
Oh, he was a judge. That's true.
Yes, he was appointed. I believe it was the 243rd.
He was appointed to the position. Though.
Yes,
But
and then I think he ran, but he ran unsuccessfully.
I see.
Is
Okay.
that the way?
Okay.
Yes. So
And
he has judicial experience too.
Right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Your donors.
Okay.
Who are your donors?
My donors are criminal defense bar, business people, family and friends.
Okay. Okay. And
the same donors I basically had for 21 years.
right. Of course, anybody can look up the
exactly.
campaign filings and see that. So why are you running for district attorney? What is prompting you to do this?
Okay. I wasn't planning to do this. I was planning to literally just stay on the bench. What prompted me to do this is the fact that I had a front row seat to the 2020, how can we say it, debacle.
It's a good word.
I am, as I said, I am a numbers metric. I know how many cases come in. I know how many cases should be coming in. That's what I do. I mean, that's what I did. I was elected an administrative judge, and I took my job serious. And even though I wasn't, after my term ended, I still continued with all the metrics. So by March of 2020, I knew we were in trouble. And I say we because we're part of a system. The DA's office doesn't operate in a vacuum. What they do, obviously, not only affects the public, but it affects everybody else.
Just so we're clear, I assume we're talking about the years of Rosales.
Yes, yes.
Right, so Yvonne Rosales ran for district attorney against James Montoya, was successful, held the position for, what, about 3 years, something like that?
I think 2 years. I think she was removed November of 22.
Right.
And then Mr. Hicks came in December of 22.
That's correct, right. So she was removed from office, which is kind of unprecedented. And I don't think anybody disagrees that the DA's office was chaotic in those years. She fired a large number of people, forced them to reapply for their jobs. Some have accused her of not reappointing people who had been associated with the Sparza or with people that she did not like. And the docket became very thick, and cases were being dismissed, and dangerous people in some cases were not prosecuted, and there was a lot of alarm that we read about in the media. And so these are the things that prompted you to run. You wanted to reestablish order.
Well, first of all, the reason that she failed is because she had no managerial experience.
Right. She's not a bad person. I know.
Oh, that. No. I'm not saying she's a bad person. I mean, I don't know her personally. I think I spoke to her maybe 2 times. I can tell you that this is an overwhelming position. I mean, like you said, multi-million-dollar budget, 170 employees. You are the district attorney. You are not an assistant DA. So your job is not to litigate cases. It's to make sure that the lights are on. It's to make sure that policy is set, the budget is prepared. If you have to reclassify, you go to Commissioner's Court. If you need positions, Commissioner's Court. You have to work with law enforcement, the judiciary, the clerks, with everybody. Those are everything that I did for 4 years as an administrative judge. And I don't think she had she completely grasped what the duties of the district attorney's office was. She had never been a supervisor. She had never handled the budget. She had never hired or fired anybody. And that was her downfall.
Right, yeah.
And when I saw by the summer of 2023, when I saw that the 2 candidates that were there had the same experience as she did, I had 2 choices. Either I shut up or I do something about it.
Name the 2 candidates.
Nancy Casas and James Montoya.
Okay, who are both Democrats.
Yes,
Right.
and I'm a Democrat too.
Okay, so I want to talk about that next before we talk about Mr. Hicks. So I'm a libertarian, full disclosure. We at the El Paso Taxpayer Revolt support whichever candidate is the best candidate, regardless of party. We don't care, especially when it comes to judges, DAs. These positions are sacred, and we don't look at party at all. We look at qualifications, period. There's just nothing else you want except for the most talented, best qualified person for the job. I don't care if they're Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, or whatever. But you have to run along party lines. And so you're in a Democratic primary.
Yes.
You, Nancy Casas, and James Montoya were in a three-way race.
Yes.
Ms. Casas was eliminated.
Yes.
And now there's a runoff, which will be decided May
28th.
May 28th is Election Day. And either you or Mr. Montoya will then advance to challenge Bill Hicks.
Yes.
Bill Hicks is the current DA, Republican. He was appointed by Governor Abbott in December 2022. And so the winner between Judge Trejo and Mr. Montoya will then face Republican incumbent Bill Hicks. And that race will not be decided until November the 5th.
Yes.
In the general election, which is a totally different dynamic. Because in the general election, you have a large number of voters. You hope they're informed, but they're not always informed when it comes to some of the local races.
And then you toss in the city elections are going to be held then. So
exactly. And you got the
it's a
city
whole
elections.
different voter.
So tell us, because we're always curious about this, whether it matters that you are a Democrat running for the position as opposed to another party. What does it mean to be a Democrat running for DA in your mind? What does that mean?
The democratic values that I share are the same values that I should have as a judge and as a DA, which is justice, fair treatment of everybody. Those are my values. Should it matter if I'm a Democrat or a Republican to be at the DA's office? No, it shouldn't. At the end of the day, you shouldn't ask people. First of all, I don't plan, once I get in there and start hiring and start forming my team, I don't care what your party affiliation is. I don't care whether you voted for me or not. I don't care whether you supported me, gave me money. I don't care. I'm like you. I want the best person there.
That's very honest. And how do you feel about the fact, for example, that in Texas, Supreme Court justices are elected along party lines? They're all Republican, all of them. And they have been for a long time, right?
That's just the nature of the beast. I can tell you that I serve on a statewide committee. I was appointed by a Republican, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, to serve on the Judicial Advisory Council from 21, my term ends next year, 2025. And I serve with Chief Justice Keller. And she lost her election in March. Here we have this Chief Justice. She had been there for I don't know how many years. And they offended the wrong person. And 3 justices were basically defeated because of an opinion that they wrote.
Wow, and that can happen in politics.
Politics is politics. There is no guarantees in politics.
Right.
And that's just the nature of the beast. We all know, we all go in knowing that we can be defeated every 4 years, or now, as a district attorney, you can now be removed. There's now, the Attorney General has formulated some new rules that now you have to do additional reporting to his office. If you don't do exactly what is required, they can remove you, and they will file a petition to remove you. So now DAs literally have a big old target on their back too.
And that's interesting. I want to come back to that actually. So let's talk qualifications.
Okay.
You've had a very long career, longer than your current opponent,
Yes.
James Montoya. who's had a distinguished career as well, but shorter, right? You've been at it now for
31 years.
years,
Oh, 32.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And you've been a trial attorney, you've been a judge, you've learned the ropes of our local judicial system. You know everybody, of course. But to be DA also means to manage a $31.25 million budget.
Mm-hmm.
That's a large budget. Most of that comes from the general fund. A good portion of that comes from grants.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking currently a little over 70 attorneys, support staff of over 100.
Mm-hmm.
It's a large unit. Do you have the kind of administrative and financial experience to manage a budget that size and so many personnel?
Absolutely.
Tell us about that.
I'm the only one who does. In 2015, I was elected to be the administrative judge of the Council of Judges, which is a county department. What my responsibilities included for 4 years is creating an $8 million budget for 200 employees, making sure we had adequate personnel to run 40 courts, make sure we had proper equipment, capital, whatever it was. That was what I did for 4 years.
What years were those?
2015 to 2019.
Now, in that capacity, did you have the power to hire and fire people unilaterally, or did you need consensus? And did you directly manage the budget?
I directly managed the budget. It was my responsibility to start with, the county starts their budget hearings like in February, March, attend those, start creating everything, start getting everything ready so we could present it in August. Did I hire and fire? Yes. At one point we had to fire our executive director. And so during that time when we were in between executive directors, I literally ran that department like day to day.
Right.
Plus I still had my court. So I was in charge of hiring, firing. When the bailiffs weren't being paid what they were supposed to, I had to take on that fight. I took it on with HR. I took it on with commissioners. Employee grievances, open records, anything that comes in that affects the judiciary, creating the jail magistrate 24/7. I spearheaded that. The paperless, when I started, probation officers literally had to get in their car and come to the courthouse to get a signature. So I implemented that. I also implemented and I created the strike team force for data metrics. Anything that the judges needed, that the courts needed, for 40 courts, I was in charge of. Every 2 years when new legislation came on, then I was in charge of implementing all the policies, practices, making sure all the forms were, everything that the judiciary has to do to keep moving forward. That was my responsibility for 4 years.
What was your title?
The local administrative judge of the Council of Judges.
And just so our viewers understand, the Council of Judges, those judges are where? Are they local? Are they statewide?
Here.
Just here in town?
Yeah, it's the 30 elected judges.
I see. Okay.
And every 2 years, we elect a local administrative judge.
And that $8 million comes from where? Is that
from the general fund.
from the county general fund?
Yes.
Got it.
And that includes, one of the things, when I started as the local administrative judge, Commissioner Perez had just ordered all those audits on the judiciary. I don't know if you remember.
I know.
And we failed all those audits miserably. And well, we should have, because people weren't paying attention. Our indigent defense, which is the court-appointed system, wasn't even, it didn't even comply with the statutes. Let's just put it that way. So I had to take care of that. I had to create the indigent defense, not only the plan, but all the procedures and policies. So I had to take care of that. I had to take care of the be instrumental in creating what we now have, a 24-hour jail magistrate court. We never had that before. Anything that came up during 2015 and 2019 are reporting with OCA, the Office of Court Administration. We weren't reporting the way we were supposed to.
Okay, so let's move forward now into policy priorities.
Okay.
we took a look at your webpage, very nice page, by the way. Why don't you just take us through briefly your basic policy positions? What are the policies that you want to implement as DA?
Okay. My prosecutorial policy or the way I see things is, and this is the way I'm going to run the office, is something we learned at baby judges school. There's two types of offenders. The first type is the one that does dumb things. They're there because they did dumb things. The other one is the scary one, and the one that is violent and is a threat to society. You need to be able to distinguish between both. You need to make sure your resources are spent on the violent, scary defendants. And that's how I plan to run things. The other thing, mental health. I mean, right now, I know this firsthand because as the local administrative judge, I can tell you I attended jail diversion meetings with emergence, with Paso Norte, with all these community partners. And mental health is a big component in the criminal justice system. There's people that are in jail for no other reason than the fact that they're not competent, and we don't have anywhere else to send them. And they literally have to stay there until they either get sent to Vernon's or their time lapses.
Right. And one of your policy positions that caught our attention was to create, that's what it says,
yes.
Create a mental health
unit. Yes.
Could you give us specifics? Because you've got a budget of $31.25 million. How much would it cost? How many staff would it require?
Right now, I'm thinking of one person. It would be that one person. The good thing is, I can tell you like Paso del Norte, Emergence, Family Services. I mean, there's tons of well, not tons, but there's many. That person is going to collaborate and basically be out there. The DA's office would attend all those meetings that I told you about, the jail diversion, the community ones, but their answer was always, well, we'll let Hyman know and we'll get back to you. That's what I'm going to do different. That person is going to be, first of all, knowledgeable in mental health and know all these things. And then second of all, be able to make decisions so that we can be a partner. One of the good things that we have been advocating for, and it looks like it's finally going to happen, is jail-based competency restoration. If our defendants were incompetent, then we have no choice. Well, we had two options, outpatient, or we could send them to Vernon's. There's a list of about 600 and some, the list is about 600 to get to Vernon's. So some of our people wouldn't even make it there. Now, they've given us an option, and El Paso, the Sheriff Wiles was on board. I don't know, unfortunately, it all depends on who the new sheriff is, but he was on board to start a jail-based, which means some of the people could regain competency here without having to send them out there.
Right, okay.
And then we have a new mental health court that we plan, that right now the DA's office is a part of, and we plan to be a part of that. So we're going to start small, and then we're going to keep growing. And just to make sure that all the available services are there for defendants. But my ultimate goal at some point down the road, and hopefully through grants, is to have some type of mental health services for the victims too.
So we're talking about, let's call it a modest expansion of the budget. You'll need some personnel, more offices, probably aides and other resources. And so you'll probably have to, I mean, that'll be an ask to the Commissioner's Court.
Yes, I mean, and the second part is a wish list right now. If the grants are there, I would hope, I know right now, there's a lot of money for grants in mental health. I know that for a fact. Okay. Eventually, I would like to, I would love to have either a contract with or something with some type of counseling that our victims, if they don't qualify for another type of counseling, they can actually go here. Because, some of the victims really do need therapy. And
Can you give us an
sometimes-
idea of how many people are in our jails who are there because they're mentally ill? Is it a small number? Is it a large number? Is it 10%? Is there a
No.
ballpark figure?
We're thinking about a good 40%.
40%?
And if you ask any of the, right now,
40% of people in our jails are mentally ill.
yes.
And they're there because they're mentally ill.
Well, I mean, their mental illness could have caused them to,
It impaired their judgment,
yes,
they committed crimes.
and then they're there.
Wow.
So,
That's a high figure. Do you
It
anticipate
is.
then that creating this unit could potentially lead to cost savings?
I'm hoping.
Okay.
And I'm hoping that there's options, because it really doesn't serve a purpose to have somebody who's mentally ill just sitting in there in the county jail.
Right.
But once again, is it low risk versus high risk? I
Let's-
mean, with high risk, I mean, they're staying there.
Let's talk a little bit about your opponents now.
Okay?
Next phase of our talk. So Bill Hicks comes in December 2022, Republican appointed by the governor,
Mhm.
and he's got a daunting task.
Yes.
So the number of attorneys have dropped below 60, I think. Now you've got a little over 70 attorneys, approximately. There's always an attrition rate that you have to deal with. You're hiring people as they're leaving, and you hope you can get it back up to around 85, is my understanding. And there's also restaffing. It's not just the attorneys. There's a lot that needs fixing there. And then the docket. And my understanding is that the docket has been approximately cut in half in terms of pending workload since he assumed office.
Which docket was cut in half?
I'm just quoting Mr. Hicks.
Okay.
In any case, what do you think of the job that Mr. Hicks is doing? Is he doing a good job? What could he be doing better? What is he doing right?
Okay. Well, first of all, kudos to the prosecutors for last week. They actually tried 3 capital murder cases and 1 murder, and they were all successful. These were old cases. One of them, the person had been in the county jail for 6 years. So, when you say docket, let me kind of explain. In 2020, what happened was that the head of the intake, and that's the people that literally take in the cases, screen them, take them to the grand jury, and file the cases. She was fired. And it's one of those specialized jobs that I can tell you that it's a very specialized job.
That created a domino effect.
Of course. So they got rid of her. Guess what happened? Nobody knew how to do this job.
The cases piled up.
Yes. So cases piled up. What happened is under the Code of Criminal Procedures, you have a certain amount of time to file cases.
There's a statute of limitations.
Yes, 17.151. And so what was happening is that all these felonies, if they weren't filed within 90 days, guess what? They were walking out the door. Misdemeanors, 30 days, walking out the door. DWIs weren't filed within 15 days, they were walking out the door. So that's what was happening. All those dismissals that came out in the media, that's exactly what happened. My understanding is that there was 16,000 or some crazy number like that. So Mr. Hicks was appointed. The first thing he did, which I agree with him 100%, is bring back that person.
The same person.
The same person.
Who was very competent.
Who is very competent, who was an ADA with me, and who, trust me, she's not going anywhere for a very long time. So they started filing those cases. I mean, they were working around the clock. They have managed to file all those cases. Those cases are now filed cases. So you literally took them from one stack, now you put them in the trial stack, because now they're in courts. Since he came on, about 30 attorneys have left in 1 year. So
Is that his fault?
I don't know, but it's something that needs to be explored.
Okay.
And so when you have 30 attorneys leave and you can't keep the required number of prosecutors there, then let me tell you how it affects the courts.
But to be fair to Mr. Hicks, it is an upward trajectory. That is the number of attorneys is increasing. Even as people are leaving, people are coming in, and in the balance, it's an increase, correct?
Well, let me tell you how it works practically. I can tell you that under the Esparza administration, I had 2 prosecutors. In order for me to run a court, handle everything, it required 2 prosecutors. I have not had 2 prosecutors since Jaime left, which means I had to cut all my jury trials in half. If I said 20, I now could only set 10. I could only now set 10 one time a week. If I used to set 50 judicial conferences, I can now only set 25.
Right.
Because only one person. I've been dealing with one person. When I left, there was 3 county courts that didn't have a prosecutor because there wasn't enough people there. Supervisors had to be handling day-to-day docket. That's what the reality is.
Right. Let's get more specific, though. Mr. Hicks shares a lot in common with you. He's a trial attorney.
Yes. He was there with me.
Right. Prosecutor.
Yes.
And by all accounts, he was quite capable.
Yes.
Right? He's
skilled
attorney.
Yes.
And he's managing a $31.25 million budget. I've not heard any complaints that there's budget mismanagement. I mean, apparently he's balancing his books. What's he doing wrong?
In order to find out what he's doing wrong, you would have to read the exit interviews of people that are leaving.
Okay, so your main beef is you're thinking about the attrition, the 30 attorneys who left.
My main, I guess, well, I want to call it beef. My main goal is to make sure that when I get in there, I don't want to lose 30 attorneys in 1 year. I really don't want to. I mean,
stay
I
staffed.
want career prosecutors. I want us to be happy. I want a good workplace. So the first thing I plan to do is read all those interviews. What is causing people to leave? Who knows what the reason is? It could be, better jobs, better pay, whatever it is. So that's one of the things that I want to focus on. Be fully staffed. I want career prosecutors, and I want people to stay.
Okay, before we talk about Mr. Montoya, I just want to check.
Okay.
Everything's good here. And yes, it is. Okay. So let's talk about James Montoya, who hasn't accumulated as much experience as you, but nevertheless, he's been on the criminal and prosecutorial side. He's been at the county a long time. He ran for office unsuccessfully against Ivan Rosales. This is his second attempt at running for DA. How would you distinguish yourself from Mr. Montoya in terms of qualifications and experience?
Okay. First of all, my experience is 31 years in criminal law. His experience, I believe, is 11. And I have managerial experience. I can tell you that when I left the DA's office after 10 years as a supervisor there, I wasn't qualified to run the office. I can tell you that much. Because I didn't know how to run budgets. I didn't know anything about HR, managerial styles. I didn't know anything about that. It wasn't until I became a judge, until I became the administrative judge for 4 years, that I truly learned what it's like to run a county department. And if I hadn't had that experience, I can tell you I would not be qualified to run that office. And I think that is what distinguishes me from both Ms. Casas and Mr. Montoya. They've never supervised an attorney. They've never run a budget. They've never managed any department. They've never had to set policies, strategic planning, anything. I mean, they've never done any of that. They've been line prosecutors. I was a line prosecutor for 4 years. I can tell you, with that experience, there's no way I could have run the DA's office.
Okay. Would you say that your opponents so far have been honest in their campaign?
Well,
have they represented themselves properly in their mailers and in their statements?
Well, they do say they have experience, and I mean, I could literally say I have 40 years of experience if I count my waitressing time. But I mean, what matters here is relevant experience. So I mean, I could say, yeah, I've been 31 years, or they can say 10, or they can say 25. The question is, I think we need to dig deeper. What
Okay.
exactly is your experience? I mean, we've all been lawyers. I've been a lawyer 31 years. Ms. Casas, I believe it was 25, and then 10 or 11. Okay, so we've been lawyers. Great. But
Right.
what else have we done?
Okay.
And I can tell you that when I was the local administrative judge, I constantly worked with state agencies, so much that, and I mentioned this before, that when they needed a misdemeanor court judge on the Judicial Advisory Council, out of all Texas, I was selected because they knew the experience I had. They knew the managerial, the case management, the docket management. That's what I bring to the table that they don't.
Right. Okay. Good. And I think at this point, I want to get into the most exciting part of the interview.
Okay.
I want to talk to you about your philosophy.
Okay.
Just some general discussion of how you'd handle yourself as a prosecutor based on your philosophy. Who is your favorite Supreme Court justice of the last 20 years?
I would have to say Justice Sotomayor.
Why?
I feel that she sees things the way I do. At the end of the day, it's not about winning cases. It's about justice. And sometimes we have a case, sometimes we don't. And that's always been my philosophy. I don't cut corners. I don't hide the ball. I've always been the type of prosecutor that, you know what, here's all this evidence, and I'm still going to kick your butt.
Mm-hmm. You read her opinions regularly?
Well, not as much as I should, to tell you the truth.
Right.
So
Mr. Hicks, for example, chose Scalia.
mm-hmm.
Ms. Montoya chose Kagan.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Hicks chose Scalia because he, like a lot of people, is libertarian. I'll be quite honest, I do feel this way, that the law says what it says. And a textualist approach, I mean, it's a position that's held by a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Others feel that the Constitution is living, breathing, subject to more interpretation. The law has latitude. And you're more in that camp, that we need to use our heart and our experience to interpret the law and not necessarily accept it at face value.
Yes. I mean, keep in mind, some laws were, 160, 200 years old?
Yeah.
I mean...
Bill of Rights.
So you kind of have to, I believe, like you said, that it's living. How are we interpreting that to today's world?
Okay. Let's talk about prosecutorial discretion.
Okay.
As a DA, you will have broad discretion in terms of how you direct other prosecutors to choose cases
Mm-hmm.
and prosecute those cases.
Mm-hmm.
Some cases are going to be dismissed. They're going to be plea bargains. Others are going to be vigorously prosecuted,
Mm-hmm.
like the Walmart guy that's going to be
Mm-hmm.
prosecuted. How would you use your discretion? What would be your priorities in terms of making choices about what cases get dismissed, what cases get pled down, what cases get prosecuted?
Okay. Well, before we even get to that, there's big backlogs right now. So what I would do is I'd have my attorneys kind of divided into violent versus nonviolent, low risk versus high risk.
Is that not happening now?
I don't know. I can tell you that just from my years on the bench, it all depends on who the prosecutor is. Sometimes you get great prosecutors. I was very fortunate. I mean, I always had great prosecutors. But then there's some prosecutors that can't see the difference between high risk and low risk. And then they spend all their time on this case. And then they don't prepare your DWI, your family violence. Okay, so I would attack the backlog by running reports like within a couple of weeks and figuring out what I call clutter. my failure IDs, my old cases, nonviolent, and then I would set those up. I'd have the attorney start calling the defense attorneys, hey, look, you've got a failure ID, he doesn't have anything else, it's 3 years old, is he willing to do a class? Let's get rid of the clutter, because I want my DAs to be focusing on the DWIs and the family violence in misdemeanor court. Same thing in felony court. You have all these possession of controlled substances under 1 gram. Okay, I'm sure there's hundreds, if not thousands of those. Let's look at those. If they're just standalone, let's start getting rid of them. Okay, is your guy willing to accept this? Is he willing to do a class? Is whatever it is, let's get rid of that old clutter so that my prosecutors can concentrate on murders, on rapes, and on all those high-risk cases.
Let me ask you some specifics. Capital punishment. Have you been consistent about that, or have you changed your mind about whether capital punishment should be applied to the most egregious cases? How do you feel about capital punishment?
When we're young, we're all pro death penalty. Then once we get older, we start seeing things differently. I can tell you I prosecuted a death penalty case. I can tell you there's about 30 capital murder cases in the office right now that need to be evaluated to see if they're going to seek the death penalty or if it's going to be capital life, what we call cap life. I have no problems evaluating these cases and imposing the death penalty. There's some people that...
Doesn't Texas make mistakes occasionally, though?
Absolutely, not just Texas, El Paso. I mean, there's a few cases here that that mistakes were made. Not capital murder, obviously not capital murder, but and that's one of the things. When I say I want to build an ethical, and if we don't have the case, we don't have the case. I'm not, if witnesses recant and suppression and motions to confess were found to be coerced, as prosecutors, we need to take a look at that. Right. We can't just act like that's not happening and just keep going. So with the capital murder, I'm also a steward of taxpayers' money. I have been.
They're expensive cases.
They're expensive, very expensive. The capital murder case that I tried in the 90s, I know we spent over $1 million. Right. That's on one case. So, I mean, those are considerations that I will factor in.
Do you think capital punishment is an effective deterrent criminals?
To the defendant, that's about it.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't, unfortunately, I don't think it carries I don't think it deters other people from committing an offense. For example, like the mass shootings. I don't think that goes into
they're not thinking, if I do this,
yes,
I might be put to death in Texas. They're not even thinking that.
No. So honestly,
so then it's just about justice, really. You spend $1 million to get justice. It's not really a deterrent.
$1 million to make sure that this person will not harm someone else.
Right. Okay. That's a good way of putting it. What about immigration? The smuggling statute, which is a recent development, right? The idea that if the driver of a vehicle picks up somebody who's in the country illegally and transports that person from one place to another, that person could potentially be arrested and charged with a felony, correct? How do you feel about that?
I think every case needs to be looked at case by case, because you're going to find that in some of those cases, it's not, it shouldn't be illegal. I
mean, a lot of this, of course, comes from on high, right? The state of Texas is really trying to get aggressive on enforcing immigration laws and even replacing the federal government in some of their efforts. And of course, this devolves upon the DAs and the courts. So the DA of El Paso is under some pressure
Oh, yes.
from Austin
Yes.
to prosecute immigration cases, but you
Yes.
still have your discretion. How do you use it in the face of state pressure?
Well, first of all, you meet with all the other community partners and figure out, handle the, I guess, the problem as a community problem. But you're right, the pressure's there. And as a DA, you can't be reckless and say, well, you know what, I'm not gonna take those cases, and you know what, I'm not taking those cases either while I'm at it. Because you basically just violated your oath.
You believe in the notion that you have to enforce the law, whatever it is.
I believe in the notion that if the laws are there and a court has already said these are constitutional laws, then I have to enforce them. How I enforce them with discretion is a completely different matter.
Right, because you're talking about prioritizing cases.
Yes.
The most violent
Yes.
perpetrators, that has to be dealt with first, and the same is true with immigration law, right?
Well, yes, but what we need to keep in mind is, and this is what is occurring is the fact that when you bring in 200 state cases on rioting or whatever, assault and whatever other charges were brought, you're now dumping those into our county jail, which means they now become priority. Whether you want to make them priority or not, guess what? They're priority.
Right.
Because now, if you dump in those 200 cases, if it's a Class B misdemeanor, they have to be filed within 15 days.
Mm-hmm.
If it's 30, so now you have basically, the DA's office has had to stop what they're doing to address these. So whoever tells you, well, it's not going to be a top priority, it's because they don't know any better. It is a top priority.
Right.
You can't ignore them.
So as before, for example, if it's on the books, you can't ignore it. Its provisions must be enforced.
If a court says that they're constitutional.
If a court says that they're
Yes, I
constitutional.
mean, if they say no, then we don't address it. However, as a community, if those are the laws that we don't like, then we need to be up there at the legislature when they're discussing these laws. And
Right.
that's what we used to do. As an admin judge, there were several times that we had to go to Austin to advocate or to try to prevent these laws that were going to affect the judiciary. And that's something that the DA's office has to do, the district attorney has to do. The duty is not just here, if
The DA has to go to Austin and advocate?
Well, it doesn't have to, but if you want to, if you see there's a law that's detrimental to your community or to your office,
You would do that?
heck yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
That's what we've done before. That's what everybody does. I mean, if you can try to stop something from a bad law from taking effect, why wouldn't you do it?
As DA, would you intervene in cases that are before the Texas Supreme Court, file an amicus brief, or join a party?
If I could, and if it was one of those where it was going to affect my office or the system in a detrimental way, then yes. I mean, the DA is also a policymaker, social justice policymaker. So the DA is in charge or should be involved in many things.
Now that's an interesting thing you just said. The DA is a social justice policymaker.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate?
Well, I mean, the DA's office, the DA, not the office, let's say the community doesn't think we should be arresting possession of marijuana cases. And if you implement this program, like the First Chance program, or Jaime had the First Offenders program, where people were not arrested and given citations, that's social justice. That's doing something about it.
Right. I've heard that the state of Texas might start dismissing DAs who are duly elected and replacing them with appointees if they don't like the job the DA is doing. Is that true?
Absolutely.
Is that a recent development?
Well, I can tell you that it came out last year, or yeah, it was new laws, and there's now a DA oversight committee that is appointed.
So if Austin doesn't like, for example, how you're prosecuting or not prosecuting immigration cases, they could dismiss you.
Well,
without
not
any
dismiss me. They changed the rules. So before, it had to be somebody in your county that had to file that motion to remove you, like they did for Ms. Rosales.
That was the status quo.
That was the statute a couple years ago. Now it's anybody in Texas can file it, and the petition will be filed in Austin. It's not going to be filed in El Paso. So when you have candidates saying, well, I'm not going to do this and I'm not going to do that, either they don't know about this, or I don't know. I mean, that's why when I tell you that whatever the law is, I'm going to enforce it. My personal feelings, you're not electing me for my personal feelings.
Let's talk about DWIs, because that is a
Oh, yes.
pervasive problem in
Yes.
our community. And I'm speaking personally.
I don't go out after 10.
On the west side, and this is just the west side, right? There are people meandering in the evening after work, after their fourth or fifth or sixth drink. And I'm reading in the paper about people convicted of DWIs multiple times. The rate of recidivism is incredible. They can go through the court 7, 8, 9, 10 times before they end up in jail for any meaningful period of time. Do you think that process needs to be reformed? Should we be harder on them?
Absolutely.
I mean, they kill other people.
Oh, yes. No, I agree with you 100%. First of all, there's diagnostic tools. You need to figure out, when somebody gets arrested, you need to figure out if it was just, you know what, Betty went out. She normally doesn't go out. She went to celebrate a birthday, and they went out and she had too much to drink. Versus Betty, who's an alcoholic, and no matter what you punish her with, she is not going to change her behavior. You need to figure out what you're dealing with in order to make a recommendation. And I think that's what's been missing. There's the TRAS, Texas Risk Assessment test that probation does. There's also other diagnostic tests that Judge Anchondo has been wanting to do. He runs a DWI court. So, and I can tell you that some of the stats are that by the time you get arrested with your first DWI, you've driven at least 30 times drunk.
That's astounding. Does that set us apart from other Texas cities? Are we more lenient than Fort Worth and Austin and Galveston?
When you say lenient, the DA's office, this is what I've seen. The DA's office's recommendations on these cases are based on what juries do. So if juries give probation on DWI seconds, thirds, and intox manslaughters, which they do, then you're kind of formulating the recommendations that the DA is going to make.
Isn't that a failure of the prosecution at jury selection?
No, absolutely not. I think we're a community we're very forgiving. I mean, we have great qualities. So
what about mom with her 2 kids that got sideswiped by a drunk driver and killed with all of them? That doesn't affect these juries?
I can tell you, I don't know what went wrong, but I know that this past week, or I don't know if they started last week or this week, but I know they tried an intox manslaughter, so obviously somebody died, and obviously somebody was accused of having alcohol, which caused the death, and the jury found the person guilty of DWI, a lower sentence. So I can tell you, as far as I remember, and I've actually even talked to some of my friends who are judges, and I asked them, as a matter of fact, we were talking about it, I think it was a couple of months ago, and we were trying to think of a case in which somebody accused of intox manslaughter was actually sentenced to prison, and we couldn't think of one.
How do you feel, Alma, about government corruption? We've had our share of it in El Paso and in the school districts. When duly elected officials embezzle money, or they steer contracts, or they engage in conflicts of interest that lead to self-enrichment.
Mm-hmm.
What is the role of our DA in that?
To prosecute.
I mean, you know a lot of people. Can you set aside your personal relationships and direct your prosecutors to prosecute a city council representative, a county commissioner,
Absolutely.
constable?
Absolutely. I would have no problems doing that.
Okay.
Including an assistant DA or anybody.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, this has really been a very informative interview. Is there anything else that you'd like to add for our viewers?
Well, I would just say go out and vote. I don't care whether you vote Republican, whether you vote Democrat. That's your voice. And I can tell you the numbers for the March primary were horrendous.
What do you mean by that?
11% of El Paso voted.
Yes.
And that's including Democrats and Republicans.
It's pretty abysmal.
Yes. It was at least 20,000 less than other primaries. Other primaries would bring in about, a lot more. This one was, I believe it was 36,000 Democrats and 20,000 Republicans. It was 11%. So the runoff is probably going to be half of that. So you're going to have 5% of El Paso voting for the sheriff, district attorney, constable, and district HD 77.
Your race against James Montoya could be decided by a few votes.
Exactly.
Right.
By less, I'm thinking honestly, 5% of El Paso.
And your
of registered voters.
And your purview is around a little less than 890,000 people.
Yes.
El Paso County, from
Yes.
Fabens to Anthony, this huge
Yes.
area, and you're one person, and you have to block walk, talk to people, earn those votes. That's tough, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And that's what we've been doing. That's what we did last time. That's what we're doing again. And our campaign is just to let El Paso know the type of DA we need, and I have those qualifications. I'm ready to go in there and rebuild the trust. I know I can. I have the skill set, and I'm ready to do that. This is something I'd always wanted to run for DA, but the timing was never right. I'm a single parent. My daughter's graduating from high school this year, and God willing, she'll be at the University of Oregon come September. So I'm going to be an empty nester. So I will have nothing but time on my hands. And I'm ready to rebuild. I'm a problem solver. I'm a visionary. And I know the system from the minute somebody gets arrested to the end. I know the whole thing. I'm an expert when it comes to our data management system. That's what I've done. And policies, procedures, strategic planning, all that, that's what I enjoy. That's what I love doing. That's what I've been doing. And I think it takes a lot more than being a litigator to run an office of 170 employees with a $31 million budget.
Right. Okay. Well, the El Paso Taxpayer Revolt in this particular race, we're not endorsing any candidates. We don't endorse candidates for judicial races or DA. We did our best to treat Mr. Hicks, Mr. Montoya, and Judge Trejo the same. And we'll give them a chance, by the way, to view each other's videos and to submit a rebuttal in writing if they want to, which we will share also with the public. In any case, we want to thank you, Alma, for joining us today, for crossing town and spending a little over an hour with us.
Well,
I know our viewers will
be
appreciative, and we'll go ahead and put this up today.
Okay, alrighty. Well, thank you.
Thank you.